So roll call. Let's see, we'll start on our immediate left.
Tom Olson, member.
Kristen Distante, member.
Larry Dunn, chair.
Ann Schmidt, member.
Ray Rafferty, vice chair.
Michelle Fitzpatrick, secretary.
Very good. We have a quorum. And the first item of business is approval of minutes.
I move we approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
All right, I have a second. Is there any comments or changes, amendments to that minutes? Hearing none, pass without exception. And we'll move on. Okay. Public communications.
What do you want first?
Would you, because of the speakers, I'd
Yeah.
be better if you came up and spoke into the microphone because people have complained they can't hear anything.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so good evening, Conservation Commissioners. My name is Eugenia Villagra and I'm co-chair of Groton Conservation Advocates. Liz is in California visiting with family, but sends her regards. Shortly, a young and therefore exciting new member of GCA, her name is Beatrice Mills, will be joining us here. Our brief message to you tonight is that Groton needs to acquire and or protect as much land, especially forested land, as possible to mitigate the impacts of climate change. The Gunjiwump area in the northwest corner of Groton, for one example only, is heavily forested and hopefully the commission will do everything in its power to keep it that way. Other areas of Groton need more open space and trees, particularly low-income housing areas, such as Pequannock Bridge and Branford Manor Apartments. What could be more important than protecting our trees? Trees provide oxygen, improve air quality, ameliorate the climate, conserve water, preserve soil, and support wildlife. During the process of photosynthesis, trees take in carbon dioxide and produce the oxygen we breathe. My sincere thanks to you all for the opportunity to speak on behalf of GCA.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Zell is up. Zell as an invited speaker. As we're going through the preparations for the POCD, one of the areas we wanted to stress was sustainability. Zell has been invited to give us his take in the, should I say you're speaking for the task force or just yourself?
I'm speaking for myself.
Okay.
I indicate to you. I'm Zell Stever. Was a former chairman of this commission back in the late 1960s, which was some time ago, and enjoyed a really interesting time when I was on the commission. I am the current chairman of the Groton Resiliency and Sustainability Task Force. We've been in operation for 4 years now. This is the second time the town has had a advisory task force, if you will. We have come to a point where we are looking to discuss with the town council and the town staff as to what they would like us to do going forward in the future. We had a meeting with the town council last, like it was June, and raised the issue. We have not yet had any really further discussions. Larry and Bray both separately have been asked if I would be willing to come to chat with you about resiliency and sustainability. Obviously, the subject of our task force. Let me back up and say that this is not something new to me personally. I had the good fortune when I was in the federal government to be at one point in my career working at the White House in the Council on Environmental Quality, which really sort of sets the stage for my interest in both the issues of resiliency and sustainability. In very short order, the NEPA legislation, as is referred to as only a couple of pages in length, really set in motion a scramble throughout the federal government about what are we going to do about these, and start out things like the big water projects. Are there alternatives, and how do you look at the human environment around those issues? And I, at the time, had been working as director of water resources in Connecticut, and had the opportunity to go to Washington for a several year period on loan to work on NEPA with water resource stuff. So I got a chance to see how a number of the federal agencies, particularly the Soil Conservation Service, the Corps of Engineers, Bureau of Reclamation, those were the major agencies that I had an opportunity to oversee. And as you all, I'm sure, have experienced, NEPA has become something of a monster from the agency's point of view and from the public's point of view, because it's become mired in deep, thick paperwork. And part of the job of the council was, look, guys, this is a little piece of legislation which lays out some pretty profound ideas, but that doesn't mean that you have to produce a 1,000-page report. We need to have this simple and straightforward. So I spent several years doing that, and that was a really interesting time in my career, because I got a chance to get yelled at by some pretty senior people in the government about what are you telling us what to do in our agency, when it was not us telling them, it was the Congress telling them what to do within their agency. So that led to eventually I ending up after a series of tours with various agencies. I was asked to be involved with the State Department in the negotiations of the Earth Summit, which was the 1992 1992 UN Conference on Environment and Development. And that was really what sustainable development was all about. It basically, for the first time, tried to get 190 nations to agree that we could talk about environment and development in the same breath, and they weren't mutually exclusive, because what you had heard up to that point was that things were, well, they're either environmental issues or they're development issues, but they can't be both. And so I had the fortune to be involved with the negotiations of the 40-chapter document that put this all together. As you would expect, probably because of my interest in water, I was heavily involved in the water sector. But that sort of set the stage for what is possible, and how do you make this work, and what were the examples. And so, long story short, retired, came back to Groton, where I sort of started out now almost 60 years ago, and then got asked by two different councils to be involved with resiliency and sustainability. I'm going to sort of jump ahead and talk about how that relates to climate change, because it's really what it's all about. You all, I think, with this group know, although I haven't actually met Michelle over here, I know the rest of you pretty well from years past. In the bottom line is that we face a really existential threat going forward in this country, but also throughout the world, about climate change. And it really has to do with the heating up of the atmosphere and the Earth-ocean system. And it all goes back to, and I'm going to assume you know all this stuff, but I'm going to repeat it. Basically, the curve, when you look at in geologic time, the Earth has been through a number of periods where it's been hotter, much colder, hotter, and much colder over the million year periods, if you will. And that's pretty well documented, or very well documented, in ice cores, in sediment samples, and so forth. And so we know what that history looks like. And that has all essentially come online in the last 30 years. I mean, it's been in my career that really has become become available. And so you say, okay, so this is what's happened historically. Why is it a problem today? Well, if you look at what's called the Keating graph, where this guy started measuring on the top of a Pacific island, what's going on in temperature. If you look at the graph, and I'm going to just show you the graph of what happened pre-industrial, is a graph that shows a very slight increase in global temperature. It looks like this. And then at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the graph then goes up like this, and therefore referred to as the hockey stick. This being the part you beat the puck with, and this is the part you have in your hand. And what's that? Why is that a problem? Well, okay, so what is happening is that change is taking place at a far more rapid pace than would happen under natural conditions, as we know them. We've induced this upward trend of temperature because of our burning of principally fossil fuels. And there are other causes, but the principal one is there. So the question today is, what do we do about it? And why come talk to the Conservation Commission about it? And the answer is, I think we can do a lot about it. We are somewhat behind the power curve, if you will. The federal government finally in this last administration has gotten serious about climate change in a way that no other administration has. And I can say that because I actually worked for several different Republican and Democratic administrations. Well, I thought during the Bush-Gore that something would really happen. Turns out not really much happened at all. And then you hear it going from bad to worse. And now finally with this administration, there is real money on the table available to states and to local communities to actually try to take some of the first steps in this thing. So there are two ways of looking at climate change. It's a chronic long-term issue. It's not consistent. A lot we don't know already. I mean, we already know we don't know a lot, if we're that way. And so there's likely to be a lot of surprises as we go forward. But another way of looking at it is that we are now 150 years into the Industrial Revolution, and the temperature's already gone up. And we know that's going to have some profound effects. And some of those effects, even though the carbon dioxide principally is in the atmosphere now, we know that we haven't seen the worst of what that's going to look like. So part of the issue is, what do we do to make our community more resiliency? How do we protect ourselves against that phenomenon of what's already happened? Second part of that equation is, what do we do to prevent it from getting even worse? So it's making this go either more upright, or how do we sort of bring it down and bring it back down? And that's what's called really the mitigation part of the equation. So you have these two words that are bandied about and not well understood by Joe Q. Public: adaptation and mitigation. Adaptation is, how do you adapt to, that is, how do you become more resilient to the effects of climate change today and on into the future? And at the same time, how do you go about reducing your greenhouse gas emissions? Now, one would say, we're only a task force of small number of people here. What can we do in a town of 40,000 people? Well, I would argue we actually could do a lot if we take the time to do it. And that is really the part that has to do with, how do we mitigate? How do we reduce? We're not adapting, but how do we reduce that greenhouse gas emissions? And there we have, I think, a bunch of things we can do. The words that typically are used in this whole business is mitigation, climate adaptation, all because of greenhouse gases, and you all understand how the greenhouse gas thing works. It's like putting a wool blanket or insulation over your freezer. It keeps the heat in, and I'm not gonna get into the details, but it basically doesn't allow the radiant energy that hits the earth and warms the earth to escape back into the atmosphere. Okay, so there are a bunch of things we can do about the greenhouse gas emissions. And I should say CO2 is not the only one, not the only gas that's out there. Moisture is a greenhouse gas, methane, and there are a bunch of other chemicals out there. But the principal one is the CO2. CO2 is simple. It's when you take organic material, principally, and you take fossilized organic material and you burn it. What you're doing is you're taking a complicated molecule of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. You bring enough heat into it, and you add oxygen to that, and you end up with a byproduct of principally CO2, water vapor, and heat. And that's what we've done to ourselves. So what can we do about that? And then you hear the term green energy, and this gets wildly thrown about with particularly with the fossil fuel industry. Oh, we're doing this, and that. We're planting another 1,000 trees here. That's greenwashing. That's not really dealing with the issue. And so green energy is basically energy that is produced where you're not burning in some way or other, or doing some sort of chemical reaction that creates the heat, the CO2 in the equation. What are examples of green energy? Well, the hydro dams are one example, where Mother Nature takes and dumps water up the slope, and then that water, that rain comes down, or either a rain or snow comes down and gets impounded behind a dam, and then the height of the dam creates a potential source of energy. You run it through a rotating turbine, and at the other end of the turbine you put a generator, and that electricity comes out, which lights what's overhead here. Another example is wind power. Another example is solar panels, which may be on some of your roofs. Now, easier said than done. Part of the problem with energy, and I'm going to use these two microphones. If this is the source of the energy I'm generating, and this is the source of all the lights in your house and so forth over here, the amount of energy you generate over here has to be basically equal to what you're using over here. So this has to be a constant flow of electrons going back and forth, so to speak. And so what happens in the summer months when you hear about the brownouts? Well, what happens is that the guys over here generating electricity, whether they be green energy or fossil fuel energy, aren't able to keep up with what the guys over here, that is us, putting our air conditioners on or doing whatever we're doing to bring it up. And so you then get the brownout, which means they have to lower the voltage because you got to make this thing work. You got to have these two things balanced. Obviously, the problem with green energy, and not so much with the hydro, but with solar and with the wind, is that the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always come out. So how do you then balance in that kind of environment this whole equation? Well, in between these two sources, this is the use and the development of it, there's what we call the grid or the network, and how that gets put together. So for example, you may have wind today in California and it's dark here in the east, so maybe you can drag electrons to the east and so forth. It becomes a pretty complicated process how this is done. There's a whole history. I mean, there have been books been written about this stuff. So that's the problem with the green energy and the renewable energy. Now, sustainability is basically to carry on or withstand or to keep up prolonged activity. And so what are sustainable activities? Well, I would argue that some of the houses that we built here back in the, 17th century, and I mean, early on when this was all developed, are still standing. Those are probably pretty good examples of having something that's sustainable. It's going to be able to last a long period of time. And so that's the idea that you're trying to use the resources you have so that one, they will be long-term available to the public and to the private sectors. And at the same time are not being used in such a way that precludes future generations from using those resources. Now that gets to be, what the hell's this got to do with the Conservation Commission? A lot of argument has a lot to do with it. Because you guys are the keepers of the land base in good measure because of the whole function that you have under state statute. Now, the process of adapting, the active process of adjusting to environmental conditions, we talked about that, and the resiliency, the capacity of a strained body to recover its size, shape after being deformed. And so, an example of that is we have a flood. What's our ability to respond to the floodwaters? So I thought maybe it might be helpful as a way of sort of entering into a conversation. I brought two recent little maps with me, and they weren't done as necessarily a part of the what I've been doing with the task force, but I think may help in terms of looking at how this all goes together. Here's an example, and I'm going to hold this right here. Now, I did this map. It's basically a flood map of downtown Mystic. Now, originally I did this map so it covered the area of the current ongoing study of the flood hazard downtown Mystic. And it was very simple. I asked the question, okay, do we have a map in this town right now that shows where the buildings are and where the flood zone? And the answer was, we have all the pieces, but we don't have the map. So I asked that we put together this map. And so I went to our GIS guy and said, with a little bit of time, we fussed back and forth. And yeah, we don't need to have that. Yes, we do need to have this. We need to have the streets on here, for example, and things like that. And so the light blue is the 100-year flood. The dark blue is the 500-year flood. And take your house. I mean, there's where we are. Now, what this doesn't show you is that this guy over here, I'm just picking it randomly, may only get 3 inches of water, where this guy down here may get 2.5 feet of water. We don't know that from this map, but this is a start of looking what the picture actually looks like. Now, you might ask, well, so why did I do this, including Stonington? Well, one of the other things that I've been involved with in the task force is to look at how do we, what are the things we can do to really reduce greenhouse gas emissions here in Groton. And some years back, before this task force was formed, I got involved with looking at the downtown redevelopment of Route 1. And they said, well, we got to do something down the zone planning and zoning commission. We got to do something down there because it's not going very well. Maybe we should rezone this, and they did. They rezoned it as a mixed-use development. Well, I started to look at that, and I was very interested in that because that made good sense to me. It was a way of concentrating people. It was a way of maybe delaying or putting off so more sprawl in our community, which we know is already a problem. And it was a way of looking at development where you can protect the environment on one hand and also support economic development on the other hand. An example of sustainable development, which is what I was really very interested in. Now, so why am I showing this particular picture here? Well, this led to my looking carefully at some of the Groton maps. And I knew this because I've been here for a long time. I knew the train track ran around alongside Route 1 in Groton. Duh, what about what about transit oriented development, which is where you have people live, they can shop, they can play, but they also could hop public transportation to get to where they work or where they want to go for vacation or whatever. And I thought, transit oriented development makes good sense here. And so I started looking at this further, and as I looked at it, the train tracks have been roughly in this neighborhood for 150 years, roughly, and that depends on what section you're looking at. And there wasn't, in fact, a train station down there in right before you go across the river on the tracks, the old Groton station. And I thought, oh, okay, that makes sense. Is that the right place for that today, considering that they're really looking at the redevelopment of that so-called section there where opposite CVS and Big Y. And so I simply proposed it, said, you might think about this. And they said, oh, we got an egg and a chicken problem here. We'll deal with the egg problem later. We're not sure how we want to do with that. But that led me to think, well, there's an opportunity here. We have a resource in the ground that's called tracks. And we know we could run trains on that at high speeds, and they're in very good condition. So when I started looking at the whole transit system, the public transportation system, and again, you'll see how this gets sort of out of Groton real quick, but then comes back to Groton. I realized that, and because I experienced this personally, that if you go to New London, you can get a Shoreline East train all the way to New Haven, and then pick up Metro North to go to New York City. And why am I interested in that? Well, I have two sons that live down there, and I hate I-95. I just absolutely hate it. And I've been driving I-95 for well over 50 years, actually, about the time I went to college. So the idea was, okay, this train stops in New London. What happens between New London and Rhode Island? Well, the answer was there are no regional trains. And so that made sense. Why don't we connect up Rhode Island with Connecticut? And why am I interested in that? Well, at that point, about 4 years ago, EB said, well, we're going to get a contract to build another extra submarine a year, and we're going to hire several thousand people. We're first, it started out being only 4,000, and what you heard this year, they're now currently in a scramble to hire 5,750 employees. Now, that's not all in Groton. That includes all of the New London facilities, the Groton facilities, which are not just the shoreline at EB, but also the downtown site where the old First National was, I guess, food store was, and then where the old Two Guys, I think it was Two Guys. There's also a facility there, and then of course Electric Boat has the pretty big facility up in Quantum. I went to DOT and said, what do we have to do to get this idea of a train system going? And they said, well, just write our commissioner, we'll look into it. Well, wrote the commissioner and the governor, and we didn't hear for a year, which means they didn't really want to do anything. So it wasn't until we actually got the Commuter Rail Council involved that we got a letter back saying, oh, great idea, but cheapers, we have no money. Well, at the time that I made that presentation, I was sitting alongside me, happened to be, and I didn't know who it was at the time. It was Anthony Nolan, who was our state rep from New London. He said, well, why don't you write up a proposal and we'll submit it. Well, sure enough, it got written up, and our own state representative, Christine Connolly, put it in 2 years ago. And it was not only went through the Transportation Committee, it was then passed by the General Assembly. And so we got an authorization, but no funding. And so luckily, we have a state senator from Norwich who is co-chair of the appropriations, says, I know how to get this funded. And so $2.3 million later, she got it funded. Now, so short is, oh, you're still wanting to know what the hell does that have to do with the statistic station? Well, the way the state Mystic Station is right here. It's on a very sharp bend. If you've ever tried to get on and off the train, you can't do it. So they said, well, it's a good idea having stop in Mystic because we got all this activity over here on the Groton side of the tracks. We've also got the Seaport, and we've got Old Mystic Village, and we've got the aquarium, which people want to come to on a regular basis. And so they said, well, we really don't, the state DOT doesn't want to put this on a curve because our cars, that are our train cars, don't have an ability to unload passengers at the low level. They have to have an elevated ramp, and you can't do that when the train's tilted over and it's going around a corner. So they said, well, we will propose to put this station down to the east, past the road that leads into, am I doing this right? Yeah, leading into Mason's Island. And you know where that is. That's the place alongside the bike shop and the Buick dealership there. And if you've familiar with that road during a flood, you know that it floods already. I mean, it's not something that's a future flood, it happens already. And so we looked at that and said, oh, jeepers, you really want to spend between $20 and $50 million to put a station in a wetland? That doesn't sound like a very sustainable operation. And so we looked at this thing, we said, well, so you got this stretch between the bridge where it's pretty straightforward here. Would you put a high platform there? So here's an example of a map that was originally which started as a discussion around what are these folks over here in Groton going to do about sea level rise, and how they're going to, and what's the town going to do about the whole thing. But this then morphed into a much more broader issue. Now, why is Steve interested in getting people off 95 and into public transportation? Okay, it goes back to the issue of the hockey stick. Turns out that 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions in Connecticut comes from light trucks and automobiles. And it turns out that everybody who goes to electric boat, I think it's something like, last count I had was about 14,000 people. Most of those people hop in single occupancy vehicles and they drive. Well, wouldn't it be possible to get those people who come in from Rhode Island, possibly, or those people who come in from west of here, get on a train and be taken to a location where they could get off at where electric boat and Pfizer's meet in the city? And so I would argue this is a issue of sustainability. It is we know that if we do this, we everyday people don't have to spend as much money on having an extra automobile, which turns out for the average person who is a worker bee, that 20% of their money, 20% of their income goes to automobiles. Now that's not true of the retired people who live in Mystic, but it's certainly true of the people who are the welders and the pipe fitters and so forth that work electric boat. So what that does is it puts 20% of income, makes it available for something other than transportation, which they got to do. I mean, if they don't want to go to work, they got to have transportation. So here's an example. Now, Larry's looking at me like, Steve, you're talking to the line, how's this related to the Conservation Commission? Well, I just wanted to give you an example of what this might be able, and how this sort of thing fans out. It essentially fans into every single thing we do in the community. And so there are some things that I think, and I'll go over those now, that I think that the task force will not be able to do, because we are a creature only of the town and not of the state. You are a creature of the town and the state. Your authorizing legislation gives you the ability to do a lot of things that we're unable to do. But we know some things are going to happen here in Groton. We know we're going to have 20 inches of sea level rise by 2050. That's very well understood. And it's been documented. And we've been measuring it for a long time, and that's what's gonna happen. So a lot of the problems you see in this blue area and then the dark blue are gonna come home to roost. And some of you, I won't be here, but some of you will probably still be here when that all happens. So there are things that we can do, and let me sort of go over some of the things that mitigation might be involved with. Follow up with a downtown resiliency study that's underway right now. What are we going to do about it? What's the results? Now, what's the Conservation Commission going to do? How can it help in figuring out what to do? There are schools and town buildings that could use heat pumps, could use solar panels. Okay, now it's a little bit outside your wheelhouse, but not really that far. What about school bus electrification? I mean, we've now figured out how to solve our issue with diversity by bringing all these buses. But how many of you sat out here at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and watched the number of buses that leave the parking lot there?
42.
Right? All right. How many people are on each bus?
Like 5, maybe.
Okay. Okay. So, what's the problem? Well, it's
The parents driving the kids to school.
greenhouse gas emissions, right? Okay, of the worst kind, because a lot of those are diesel.
Diesel, yep.
Okay, so there's another example. Another example is organic composting, which the town, and I know some of you are actively working on this thing. There's the aerobic process, where you basically are doing it aerobically, and then anaerobically, that's without oxygen, where you're producing methane. Now, the state likes to put things in tanks and tubes and so forth. And so, and I think that's an industrial process which they control. And the open air, aerobic process is a little more loosey-goosey, because you got to have a guy in there measuring the temperature and then knowing when to turn it and making sure he turns it properly. But we know how to do all those things. I mean, if you go up to Vermont and look at some of the composting farms up there, they got it down to a fine art. I mean, there is, I've been to one facility where they stick the big long thermometer in. They say, this is the hot burn. And they're going to get certain kind of product from that, where another one is a cold burn. And they can do it by how they mix the material, and then having a bunch of people who are really good on their backhoes, or not, when the digger,
Special
the
truck.
the
front loaders.
Yeah, the front loaders that turn all the stuff over. So there's another example. EV charging stations, because we know that the train thing is not going to work for everybody. And in fact, cars aren't going to go away. We're going to have cars, but better to have electric cars than we have all fossil fuel cars. And so those are sort of examples of where do we put them? How do we do it strategically? And how do we do it in a way that makes sense with all the other activities that are going on in town? And then sort of the development of a what I would call a transit-oriented plan for the high level strategic redevelopment of the Route 1. We haven't done that. We put that in motion with the zone, but the town's got to have some skin in the game. And I've said this repeatedly, and feel like I'm talking to a blank wall. But unless the town has some skin in the game, it doesn't really happen. What do I mean, skin in the game? Well, we have water down there, we have electricity down there, we have apparently a stream that runs through that whole parking lot. Is there an opportunity there? We have those kinds of things that where the town potentially has a big role. Are there town functions that can be placed down there which attract people to that area? And then do we just put in rental housing, or do we put in a combination of townhouses, or a combination of townhouses, rentals, and condominiums to make that whole thing work?
What area are you talking about?
Yeah, specifically.
Yeah, I missed
Pardon?
that too. What area are you talking about?
Oh, well, I'm talking about the Route 1, the Benny's that whole big complex.
Okay,
Yeah, that got changed in the last zoning
That
cycle.
got changed in the last zoning.
That's still privately owned. So
Oh,
it's kind of a
yeah.
moot
No,
point, right?
this is my point. This is all privately owned. And one can't tell the private owner what to do. But you can set up a situation
Incentivize them, basically.
that you can say, well, if you were to do this, we have a plan of how that might fit in. Now, we can negotiate the details. Maybe the housing goes over here and the liquor store goes over here and the mom and pop news store, no, computer store goes over here. I mean, there's some things you can do, or you can't do that because there's not enough water or there's not enough power there. I mean, there are some, and this is what I'm talking about, having the town have some skin in the game, actively involved with that sort of thing. Now, I know some activities are going on, but here's an example of where the Conservation Commission has a big role. Okay, we have an asphalt opportunity. What are we gonna do with it? Do we tear it up? What kind of trees do we put in there? Do we have a water feature in there that can cool it? What are the opportunities there with the Conservation Commission to work with the other boards and commissions to get this thing and work with the private sector to get something that really would sort of fit into the notion of a sustainable community over the long term. And then on the adaption side, watershed management, what I would call waterfront development, planning and zoning and building code. Some conversations about major disaster planning with our partners. Heat, sea level rise and storm events, obviously is a big one. Heat and human health. Now we're actually in a place along the shore where that's not quite as critical as if you were in Hartford. Now, what those of you who commuted from Hartford here, when you come over the last hill, they're like,
Yep.
I'm home, drops 10 degrees. So we're not in quite the same situation that a place like Hartford is. But nevertheless, when you add up the humidity plus the temperature, it can get pretty nasty around here. And so what can you do in our community? Well, this is where the tree planting becomes really important. I mean, I say this from some practical experience. I own a glass house. It's our summer house. And I know about trees. But if the trees are not there, the place gets bloody hot. If I have trees there, I keep the place cool. And it doesn't matter whether my house is glass or my house is wood, the same principles apply. And do you want to put evergreens there? Probably not. Why is that? Well, because in the summer, you want the green vegetation to shade the house. In the winter, you'd like to gain a little bit of solar energy from the outside. So there's another example of influencing the planning and zoning and development process of what is required. Now, this whole business about, well, we can cut all the trees down and we're going to plant, 500 new trees. Slippery slope, because what we know is that the old mature trees are far better and far more capable of picking up larger volumes of CO2 than the smaller areas. Not to say that there are not circumstances where you want to. I mean, it just makes practical sense to put in places where you have open areas and they could use some shade, then to put the small trees in. You don't have to haul in, big stuff like this at all. So there's another example of what you might do. Building an energy audits and upgrades, really crucial. Some of this can be done through our local utilities. And then the whole item that you asked me to come talk about, which is how does this affect the plan of conservation and development? And so I've given you a little idea of the taste of what, and by the way, I think that's very important. I mean, but by doing this well, we set ourselves in a position, if we get agreement of what happens. My sense is in the past, this is something they had to do because they knew if they didn't do it, they wouldn't get money. The town wouldn't get money, the towns wouldn't get money from the state. Now, the state's been a little bit sloppy about that process. But at some point, someone is going to say, you know, this is serious and we want it to really stick. So I would argue that the plan of conservation development becomes very important moving forward. And I think there are examples, particularly in the past, of where we had sustainable communities in our right here in Groton. I mean, you look at like downtown Michigan, when I first got here, there was a food store downtown, you could walk to it. You could get shoes there. You could, there was a, you know, it was a much broader, but people didn't have to go very far. Noack was the same sort of thing. You know, there was the Universal Food Store there. You get your haircut there. The only you couldn't get there. You get your liquor there. You couldn't get it. You could get your haircut there, but you couldn't really get a drugstore. But so there are examples of where in the past we have been pretty sustainable, but we've lost that in good measure because of the auto tip. We've now allowed ourselves to become a sprawled community. And the question is, how do we pull this back? Part of my argument with stuff I showed you here with the train stop is that why don't we use the resources we have in the ground? It's a whole lot cheaper than putting a new road through. So that's sort of where I am. I'm happy to chat with you, answer questions. This is sort of the overview that I think may be useful. Larry?
Thank you. I made a lot of notes. There's a lot of intersections, so I think if I start at the back and work towards your front of the presentation. We agree that the POCD as a long-range planning tool is critical because this is a long-range problem. So you just can't do it day one or day two, which is kind of why we invited you here. So there's a number of things that there's a number of things that need to be in that plan. And if you look at the last plan, none of it was there. Right. So that recognition, I think, just that shift, I mean, that's good news. So there's a lot of thought and ideas that, I just, jotted down in terms of mitigation and adaptability.
Adaptation.
Adaptation. And the question is more of how do we get to where we want to be? And it's short range and long range, mid range and long range issues.
Let me say, my experience over the last.
Oh yeah, that's my theme song.
Or spam.
Yep. No,
My experience in the town
it
is we have passed up a lot of opportunities. Partly because people were afraid of what would happen. And maybe rightly so. It's easier to plan than it is to take action.
Mhm.
And so I would hope that you characterize the planning effort in going to taking the steps of actually, what does that mean in terms of what action we'll take? In other words, if we're really going to talk about putting solar panels on our buildings, what's the time frame? How do we measure it? Because if we don't measure it, we can't manage it. Things like that. So you set a pattern because, and I don't think this is untypical of other communities as well. It's easy to plan. You can get a big grant money and when people don't know what to do, what do? They plan. And they plan and they plan. But there are some things we can do. For example, this would be pretty radical at this point, but there are communities throughout the country where they've said, we need to have all new construction go electric. You mean I can't have my gas stove? And the answer is, yeah, that's what it means. Why? Well, because you're basically taking fossil fuel and you're cooking with it. I mean, that's the bottom line, where if you take electricity that is developed from green sources, you're not doing the same thing. Now, are any one of these things perfect? The answer is absolutely not. They're not perfect, but it's a trend that you want to try to move towards. So there's a simple example. which I can hear it now. I mean, you know. They would not, or another example that I've seen in a number of places is new construction. You're putting a garage in. You're also putting in a 220 charger for your potential electric car of the future. It's not an option. You have to put it in. You have to put the fire alarm in. You got to put the charger in your car. There's another example. People will say, well, we don't have the authorization to do that. Oh, yes, you do. Yeah, it may not be the state code, but you could be on the state code. Now you have to get everybody to agree to this. Not going to be easy, and it has to be done in a way that is acceptable. Now you're not just telling everybody they have to ditch their gas stoves tomorrow. You're telling only a new construction. Will that have some immediate impacts? Yes, but the long-term gains are probably exceeding. What's an example of that? We know that if we make a house tight, energy, make it so it's airtight, and we put a lot of insulation, we use far less energy. So going to a standard which says studs are 24 in center and they're 2x6s, everybody will go crazy. We can't do that. It's going to raise the price. Well, it may raise the price initially and what it costs to build a house, what a person's paid for. But down the line, I mean, they will save a dramatic amount of money because of the energy load they're going to require to keep that house either warm or cool, depending on what season it is. So there's another example. So there are steps that you can take. Another example is, so what vehicles have to accelerate fast in town and catch people?
Police cars.
Hmm?
Police cars.
Police cars. Has anybody ridden in a Tesla?
She got one.
I mean, talk about rocket.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, she's got one too. But talk about rockets.
Yeah.
I mean, they would be, and they're not driving 300 miles across the country. They come home every night or between shifts and they could get plugged in. So there's another example. Now, is there some resistance to that sort of thinking? You betcha. When I raised the issue, could you think about hybrids first? Oh yeah, but we have to send everybody to school. They're not driving. Okay. But I mean, that's the resistance, kind of resistance you're likely to have. But there are these opportunities that exist. Why aren't all of our mediums got trees on them? Now, yeah, well, people say, well, they might fall down in a hurricane. Yeah, they may. And maybe you don't want to plant a major white oak, but how about something like a pin oak, which gives you shade? I mean, there are ways to try to do this, all of which falls, I think, back in your sort of duties as conservation commissioners. I think you have an obligation to say, here's what can be done. Now, you got to think these things through. It's not so easy just to say, I can hear it now. If I went to the county council, says we're going to plant trees on every median, I can just hear that go crazy. But you know, in time, that may be appropriate.
I have a question. I think everybody here is very up on climate change and the science behind it and all of that. And who's not maybe as educated about it is maybe the town council. So that would be a really good place to do some like kind of basic science lessons on what is the whole thing? Because I don't know that there's the depth of understanding there and the sense of urgency and concern that this body has.
Well, one of the things that we have started, I mean, part of what we were asked to do is to provide some education. And luck would have it, our entire group, everybody in our group has had either been a teacher or a professor or had some major role. I mean, Frank Boland's professor, Jesse Stratton taught, I taught. I mean, we just got on the line, so we have some experiences. So we did hold a Groton forum about the whole big picture, which some of you may have attended. was over at the
55.
55 Thrive operation. And it was well attended. And so I think we have opportunities, for example, to talk about things like storms, flooding. I mean, and the flooding, I mean, people assume that flooding is related to the ocean coming in. Well, what's been very clear over the last year, well, actually it goes back quite a way. I mean, anybody remember what happened in 2010?
10.
We shut down the town for a good day because all the water from just plain precipitation and like it stopped everything. So we have two kinds of flooding, but most of what you see in these maps is what has to do with sea level. So there is another example of now, is it exactly in your wheelhouse? Probably not. But working with others and I think you can be.
One thing I haven't heard from you is the money side, as far as you talk about the town council not being able to support it. It's not because of the ideas, it's because how do I make this all happen? Because there's a
Okay.
price tag
So
from if you want the town to be leading things.
good question. So one of the things that we realized very quick on, and it was a little bit humorous.
Mhm.
We were told, okay, you're now established to go forth and do good things to town. But by the way, you can't use any town staff
Mhm.
and you have no budget.
Mhm.
Oh, really? Okay. So what can we do? So one of the recommendations right off the blocks was you need to hire full-time resiliency and sustainability manager. And it only took 2 years,
Mhm.
but we've actually got that. Megan Granada was on board. And that was our first step. Now, why was that important? Because we knew that for the very reason you said, we haven't got the resources to do it. What I know now, as of last year, is that there is just gobs of federal money out there. For all kinds of activities, both for infrastructure and for climate change. And we're not taking advantage of it. So hopefully.
That's some of that's going on. So in the
Yes.
interest of time. If I look between Ray and Ann. The sections of the POCD for sustainability and etc. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I heard that I almost can kind of feel an outline. For a piece, so
Oh,
he
yeah.
kind of ran through my head as Zell was speaking. I would suggest that a subcommittee session, we kind of extract this so that we don't do this in this session, but extract it. And like we did on waste management, come up with an outline on what's the approach. There more stuff happened today that I'll talk to that'll feed that. But that would be my suggestion. And I'd be more than happy to be a third person, because we only have 3 on that thing, if unless someone else wants to join that. So I would say that's at least one action, and you'll hear some other things that has already been underway, because you got community involvement and awareness, you got town council, you got to spend some money, you got to get the actual projects defined, so there's a whole number of things going on that intersect. I mean, we also have a lot of stuff going on in the tree department, which we're going to talk more about as well. So I feel that you kind of gave us a kickstart on. It might be an outline of things we could address, whether we can get them all done or not, I don't know. But I think it's there. Now, the other part that I want to talk to is what I've said is cross-commission interaction and support. In the past, commissions didn't talk to each other. Commissions did not talk to each other or do anything operationally together.
Still aren't.
We're working to change that. For
I
example,
understand.
on the POCD specifically, they've got agreement with ECD, P and Z and us. Right, because if you look at it, plan of conservation and development. So clearly we believe.
It sounds like sustainable development to me. I mean, that's a little.
Well, yeah, okay. But the point is that you can't do one without the other, and they do kind of support each other.
Well, you want to make sure they do support each other.
No, yeah.
That's the
So,
point.
so we've got an action plan where the three commissions, working with the town staff, is going to be working on the various aspects of the P O C D. So the input from our input then goes into that three-party, or I guess four-party group to move that ball forward. So now meanwhile, we've got Megan is working on submitting grant funding and other things. So
No, she has secured
Yep.
a $200,000
right,
planning grant.
which is just a start.
It's a start.
Just a start.
And there is some town money involved with that as well.
Yep.
That's good.
So we're gonna be working on that. What I'd like to do is,
Can I suggest that
yes,
you sit down with a org chart and look at the entire town commissions that exist? Because I think you're gonna find there's just more than 4 of you.
I hear you, but
Just saying,
I hear you, but trying to get three town commissions to work together on
I
a thing was
well, I mean,
forward.
there's some things I would just, for what it's worth, suggest. You don't do it on the day before a holiday, for starters. I mean, there's some practical things, if you want people to really get together, some upfront. Commission chairman to commission chairman has to take place. That's the only way it's gonna happen.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I mean, and it's gonna take time, and you can't, I mean, someone has to take a leadership role.
Okay,
And I-
fair enough.
And I'm leaving it open like that,
Yeah, no, I hear you.
okay?
So we'll at least talk about this is what has happened. So I thank you
Okay,
for your input.
and I'd be happy to work with a task or with a group, a subgroup, or be happy to come
Oh, I
back.
already signed you up. But thank you for offering.
But you haven't got my fee yet, so you don't know.
That's okay.
Because I know you're funded.
I'm sure, actually, we're not, but that's another. Oh, actually, I guess we have a little teeny amount.
We'll buy you some
So-
coffee.
Huh? Oh,
Like the-
that'll go a long way, actually.
We do have coffee.
But I mean, I'm serious, I'm happy, because I think it is absolutely crucial. Because
Yep.
I mean, one of the things that our task force doesn't have, that you do have, we have no, other than a town council member thinking this is a good idea. That's our authorization.
Yeah,
We
well,
don't have
but
the-
your task force has got a lot of brain power, so your task force has a lot of brain power, so
Well,
we want to
thank
tap
God
that.
you do, but I
Right.
mean, you don't have enabling legislation like you do.
Yep.
I mean, what we've got are these bits and pieces of weird stuff, like the state says you'll consider 20 inches of sea level rise by 2050. Okay, what's that mean? Or we're going to become well, I can't remember the numbers nowadays, 50% green by 2030. What? What do you mean? Okay, that's fine. What does that mean? How are you gonna do that? That's the kind of
Yep.
problem.
Yep, I hear you. Okay.
Okay,
Okay,
good. Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so,
you.
so that was one. Let me kind of go through and update you on other things that have happened. And then we can come back to that if you want.
If we have a comment from this, we do that after, you're gonna go, and then we have a comment about this?
Well, yes, I would like to go a little farther down when we get
Okay.
to the other sections. I think
Okay,
by getting more input, it'd be a better response. Right. So real quick, I'll try and go through some of these things we're now into the report of chair. Oh, we had another, was that your new member of the GCA? Does she have something in addition to what you said? No, okay, so we'll move on. Okay, so we'll move on to the report of chair. So real quick, last month, we talked about the three commission members are up for, I guess, new terms. So all three, Rafferty, DeSante, and Olson have agreed and have been signed up, and the paperwork has been submitted. So thank you for your continued participation. I'm assuming, Dave, that's fine. I haven't heard any pushback or anything. Okay,
You do what you need to do, and so you addressed it and you
Okay.
addressed them, and so it's, yes, back.
okay.
in there.
So that check, so we can check that
Yeah.
off. Last month, there was a request, one of which I made, to add the Alliance for Mystic River Watershed and the Tri-Town Trail Association to the Alliance page on the Conservation Commission website. So that's been added. So if the part of the purpose of that is, I think there's now up to 10 community organizations which is now being called the constituency of conservation. That's what John Reiner called it. So I'll use his term. And what we want to do is to use not just the Conservation Commission, because yes, we do have a little bit of state authority, but to then engage all the other groups at the appropriate time for certain appropriate things, like show up at this town council meeting when we're going after a budget. These are things that we discussed. We would like not just GCA, but all these other organizations to come and support issue A, B, C, or D. So we keep adding to that list. And so it's actually a fairly broad.
Do you have a list of those?
Yes,
10 groups?
it's on the website.
Okay.
I just said that.
Okay, then, yeah.
Yes, those are listed in the website, and there's links to each of the individual web pages that's there. Now, there was a meeting on the 14th on open space property, and that was myself, Tom Olson, Deb Jones, David, and
John Reiner.
Noah was,
And Noah.
and Noah, yep,
John
yep, yep.
Reiner and Noah.
And Noah, yep. So I'll just do a quick synopsis of, that's an agenda, right? Okay, that's in the agenda. But I think, and some of the actions have actually been completed. So we did some toing and froing and came up with some agreements on how we were going to document, track, record, and publish what are the open space parameters, properties, et cetera, within the town.
No,
The-
I wouldn't portray that we've focused on accessibility areas in the town that have general access for the general public.
Yeah,
What parcels are there?
well, two things. One is versus the total property, which is about 60% of the property owned by the town is in fact open space property. Some of that is accessible and some of that is not accessible. So as we went through it, the open space, the Conservation Commission Open Space Viewer, which is available, by the way, to our partners out there in the conservation land, but is not going to be made available to the general public because it doesn't address accessibility per se, and we didn't want to avoid confusion. But the agreement was that the GIS system would be updated based upon the accessibility information extracted. So it's a subset, and that would be published through the town website and made available to the general public. So that was that kind of, I know we've been going for like 9-10 months on, is the viewer available, not available, not available. So we've kind of settled that says it is for Conservation Commission and it's designated partners. And the extract of that, defined by accessibility, would then be available to the general public. Okay, so that was actually a step forward. And that was actually 1 and 2. Hold on. Then Tom and Mark Berry were assigned to close on updating the listing of parcels to support that activity. And that is, there is an update, I think, is in the handout or agenda.
Yeah, this is a working document. This is what we submitted to Mark Berry. He's come back with some updates to that, which I have reflected in the one that's on the working database. And then I also identified some missing ones that were obviously should have been included. There was I think one or two parcels that we missed, and that that he's now going back and reviewing and concur with. I have not gotten back. He has not gotten back to me. And just for full disclosure, here at 6:30, I have to go over to the Parks and Rec master plan.
Well, I was just gonna say, don't we have to get the Parks and Rec
That also is incorporated.
to get that, to get their approval? So we're close.
We're very close.
We're close. Okay, so that's good. We also said that the Conservation Commission will publish an inventory summary June 30th of each year, which corresponds to the town's fiscal year. To talk about the total open space acres, percent of town property conforming to the state definition of preserved and protected, total accessible open space, and the percent of town property, as we talked about earlier, the two different, one's a subset of the other. We did publish, that's in this agenda or last agenda?
It's in this one.
It's in this one?
Yep.
So that initial letter, it's not June, obviously, so it was late. It was published, and we're kind of going to do a cycle in first quarter just to get it all reviewed, and then we're going to go to yearly updates after that. So that's moving forward. We also agreed to a CIP for open space to be submitted for the review. That's in the agenda. We have done an update. We have submitted to the town staff for review. And the summary of that, for those of you that haven't read the agenda, is we've been going through, and I'm kind of getting to the point you made about how much open space is enough open space. I mean, our target's 30%. We're at like 28 or something like that. So from that perspective, we're closing in on it. And rather than having the debate, which we have every year, that the town council doesn't want to put money in a reserve bank to purchase open space, we changed our philosophy to say, we want to let me rephrase that. We want to ensure that there's enough money available in that CIP to investigate, survey, provide the right material so that we can then make a case for a specific property and go for individual funding on a property by property basis. And we set that, I won't say arbitrarily, but we thought it was like 75,000.
Well, it was based on actual expenses that we experienced in the recent Wolfbrook and the Sparkle Lake. What those costs were, we took a look at those and basically said, and what the going rates are. So that was a reasonable amount to get started with.
Now, given the fact that the town gets monies from developers per that 10%, cash or space thing, subdivision thing, and it's solely for the use of open space acquisition, we are now sitting at about double that. Well, maybe a little more. Well, it keeps coming in. It keeps coming in. So the point is that don't worry, there's another but coming, that we're in pretty good shape so that we have enough funding to review, pursue, understand, support, if you will, the acquisition of a parcel, once we kind of set our sights on what that parcel is. Right. So that's, I think, good news. Now, in addition to that, there's two other CIPs. When I'll wait a little bit because it's a different meeting, was a CIP for Parks and Rec based upon the fact that we acquired all this property. Unfortunately, the town has not funded stewardship to maintain, provide accessibility, get rid of invasive species, all these things, to make those viable open space properties, which actually do help contribute to the, carbon sequestration issue. So we're going to be putting in or creating a CIP that's with Mark Berry. Tom's taking the lead of that with Mark on how much we should add to that. For example, that's one item that I would throw out there for the conservation constituency, I guess constituency to support when we get to the town budget cycle that says, it's not enough to buy a piece of property. You got to maintain it and make sure that it's really living, providing the potential that it should. So that was that meeting. Then we had a meeting with John Reiner, Megan Granado, and our friend Dave. And we talked about the sustainability budget and POCD plans. So this was a result of a prior discussion we've had at our last two meetings. And we did agree that the budget will have a new CIP for sustainability. This is in addition to Megan's salary and budget carrying on, additional funds to address that practical first step. So we had some long debates about how much did we want to go after. We said, well, let's go after something practical. I'll get back to your point of do something, don't plan something. So we opted to say, let's put something in there that actually does something, a real project with very specific implementation and results. And that then would be the beginning that we would build. As I said, this is a multi-year effort that we could build upon and add additional funds and eventually get to the multi-millions of dollars this probably will take. But we aren't going to get that day one. We also agreed, as I said earlier, that there will be a meeting in December to discuss the consultant statement of work in the RFP issued by the town that will be done with P&Z, ECD, and the Conservation Commission and staff. So it's kind of like the first step that says, let's make sure that if we're going to spend town money to go charter a consulting group to go start to draft the POCD, that we steer them in the direction that we want. Now I'll come back to where I said I'd come back to, is that by the December meeting, I think it's December 4th.
4th to the 11th right now.
Yeah, 4th to 11th. That by that time, we'd like to kind of crisp up, the kind of things that Zell said, but get kind of specific. And it's really direction to the consultant on what we want them to do. Right? So that's funding that the town has already approved to do that. So we want to latch on to that funding. Probably a bad choice of words. We want to utilize that funding to promote the sustainability and that we think ought to be there. And then with the other two commissions, hopefully we can get agreement on that. So that's that. Okay, at the same time,
Good place for my comment.
but I'm sorry.
This is a really good place for my comment.
Okay, comment.
So my comment is that up until now, we've been kind of talking about the conservation part of this is our part of the plan is the conservation part and then the development part. And I know the way we've been talking, maybe it's undercurrent is there, but I would like us to go on record as specifically saying that we want the entire plan, so all the development recommendations to include sustainability, like how they would be sustainable.
Yes.
That hasn't been stated obviously like that,
Okay.
and I really want to state that.
But yes, as we go in with this, that's something that we
Right,
need to do
but
because
that's-
get back to when you
yes.
do development, do we want to have charging stations and
So our
to the
goal should be
zoning
that
laws, yeah.
everything they recommend includes
Correct.
sustainability in their recommendations, in addition to the stuff that's in our section of the doc.
Correct.
I just want to put that on record.
Yeah. We got a little bit more oomph on our section, but I agree, we need to address it in all the sections. Now, in parallel with that, we want to begin community support for that CIP for sustainability. And that kickoff will be in February. And I requested, and I was told that we would get a fact sheet that we could then engage with the conservation constituency. It's like, we don't need these big flowery documents. Just give me a from the old marketing thing, a cut sheet that says, here's the specifics we want to aim at. And that's where we want to gain community support on. Yes.
So, this is a point that was made. know that the town council did pass a resolution basically saying that they would do that. And I can, if you want me to give you the citation, it was March 2nd, 2021. And adopt resolution of commitment to address climate change, resiliency, and sustainability as a central management principle for all actions of the town government. You've got an authority in that loosely worded.
That
Yep,
was
yep,
the
yep.
last town council, wasn't it?
No, it was
This one?
this one.
2021.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, if this town council makes it, it applies to the next town council.
Correct,
Unless
unless they do a vote to rescind it, right?
we got a bit of
Yeah.
horsepower here. For
The question comes down to now allocate the funds to support that statement. That's what we have to remind people of and to force that issue. Okay, so having said,
it's there.
okay. So things are kind of lining up. And the good news is there's enough money and there's a lot of money sloshing around, which was never there before. So I'm feeling slightly more hopeful than in prior years. Now, in addition to that, this relates to, I confirmed with SCARA that the Conservation Commission is on the invite list for their November 29th presentation, which is on the forecast of waste management costs for in the future. So that was more of a follow-up that I had to do, and I had that meeting with SCARA.
Conservation Commission meeting, you was a representative or any one of those.
It can be open. I mean, it's not, well, I guess technically we can't have more than 3.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, I'm just the contact point. I can thing, and if somebody else wants to go, then absolutely.
Okay.
Right, but we don't want to limit it to 3.
I'd be interested.
Yeah, I'm on the waste. You and I. are the
Yeah,
waste
no,
team, so-
right, yes. Yep, so you're on the waste team anyway, so, but then, okay, so I'll keep that in mind.
There's 3 of us.
That's 3. All right, we got it. Could you make note of that? Okay.
Got it.
Then, speaking of eelgrass, I'm on the state committee for eelgrass. That was one of those vaguely worded state task mandates to go do something about it, but without saying what or without money. But other than that, it was the normal state. Anyway, so the next meeting on that is the October 5th, which is this week. So I don't have any updates from the last time I met with you guys. Right?
Can I,
Yes.
well, just add to that, today I participated in a project in the Niantic River of planting eelgrass that is with, Jamie Vaudry and Near.
Yep.
Through that organization. So they had at Avery Point, they had a group of us putting together planting units for eelgrass, which is a new experiment on their part. And the planting will be done sometime later in the month.
So that's good. You're right. NER is new, I guess, the newest one. And that helps this whole process as well. So again, things kind of are getting aligned. It just takes a really long time, some of this stuff. But at least that's something moving forward.
Hey Larry, on that
Yes.
on that note too. So I was Tim Weisel. He used to work for Connecticut Sea Grant and a bunch of other places. He's done a lot of work on not so much the eelgrass side of things, but on basically the sediment side of things. And he actually came in before the meeting. He couldn't stay for it, but I have a few things just to hand out to you all. I'm going to put him in contact with you because he has some interesting stuff about marine sediments and eelgrass too, and he wanted to at least pass this stuff along.
Right.
In case you're
Contact information is on the sheet.
interested. No, but
Oh.
I'm going to connect you guys by email.
Is
Okay.
it for everybody?
It's for everyone. Yeah, he had a copy for everyone. Yeah. I don't know what the second thing is, but he said hand this out too.
Oh,
So
And you dutifully have done so.
I have done so. The other thing has a lot to do with shellfish, especially in the Paquonic area and again, the sediments. So, but
Okay,
I'll put you in contact
thank you.
and he knows that too.
All right, I'm almost done. One more item. I did present at the P and Z Commission on September 26th. That presentation is in the agenda. Which I had agreement with Jeff Pritchard beforehand, and this was getting the entire commission kind of on board with the actions I've already mentioned earlier in this conversation. That ends my chair report. Next is a report from the commission members. I will start to the right this time.
Nothing that's not on the agenda.
I gave mine.
Oh, I got your, yeah, I got your good. And
I want to thank Tom for supplying additional information on the open space and the analysis with the social justice piece. He added the National Park and Recreation criteria. And so we have at least a bit more information, narrowed down some of the properties, and I'll continue to work on that analysis. Hopefully, it's in progress. I think we have our marching orders after today's talk from Sal on outlining EOCD sustainability. I think that's really about it.
okay, thank you.
I haven't done much. You and I didn't meet because I wasn't available. But I got a notice from Eugenia that this might pertain to our student whatever's. There's a trip director for an environmental conservation trip. These are students from, I guess, UConn. And they're the weekend of November 3rd to 5th. They have 10 to 15 college age volunteers looking for a project. And I was thinking about the stewardship piece, or maybe invasive removals, on some of our open spaces. Just throwing it out there. I mean, it's kind of short notice for us to put something together, but they've got 10 or 15 kids willing to work. Yep. They found a project. Okay. Okay. There you go. Good. Good.
Yeah, we don't have a process yet for bringing in random volunteers to do
Right.
things, so it would be nice if we were ready to take
Yeah.
that kind of a group, but I'm glad Ghosts have found something for them to do.
And Rockland beautification, I noticed that front little, talking about the median planting has, they started planting over there. Pollinator Pathways wasn't in the loop on that one, but they planted that little edge right on the inside of this parking lot. And they're gonna finish it in the spring. So that's good. We're talking about more pollinator gardens, more green stuff.
And Tom?
Well, you've already mentioned what I did with the updates. That's what's included in your, Larry's on page 7, put the summary together. That was based on the proposed parks and regulation facility inventory that's included here as of that date. That's why I said that Mark has come up and kind of categorized stuff based on the master plan categorization that he got from this new thing. And so I've already reflected that, and I'm coming up with it, and we're working finalizing this update. So this was as of September 15th, and we're already working on the next revision.
So the working database of September 29th
Yeah, that reflects of September 29th reflects
reflects
change.
all the stuff. So
Right.
that's the latest.
That's the latest one, right? The
Okay.
29th, because this was dated the 15th and stuff. Now there's a 29th.
So 29th, okay.
2
Just
weeks later.
to keep
Yes.
the
2 weeks.
the version control.
Right, it's version
Fine.
control. I put the dates on them.
Yep, no, that's good. That's good.
That's the most recent version
Okay.
in there. And I don't know did you want me to talk about the tax abatement thing or? Are you gonna
Well,
do that?
given the fact that you're gonna leave at 6:30, I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Okay, one of the things that the state approved this year was to putting a concert, allowing towns to have an ordinance to give abatements in the form of when the conservation easement is issued for recreation purposes, specifically for trails and stuff. Ledyard already has this in place. They installed it a number of years ago. And they I took and that's why we included the items in your packet here on page 15 as what what was the analysis for the bill that was done in preparations for it, the actual text of the bill, a portion. The bill is 75 pages long, but there's only the page or just 1 page's worth here is all the applicability for this abatement to how you would go implement that at the town ordinance level. And then I also put a draft ordinance based on taking Ledyard's and saying this is what it would look like for Groton. Okay, so I put a draft in here, and then I kind of did a quick analysis. As we have the text of the state thing is basically focused on greenways and other trails. Well, right now we don't have other trails. We already have 2 greenways, and there are sections that would apply to that we have that are designated in the greenways, but that have not been put in place yet because there's easements haven't either from the Tri-Town Trail or from the town to go on after those. And so what the costs would be, Larry asked me to take a look at what areas would be affected by this. And it turns out it's only 3 parcels for the 2 greenways that aren't already owned by the town. Okay. And then when I did them, that's what comes on page 25 of the package today. It comes up that some of this stuff is already it's of a low value, and so it'd be like to put in the conservation easement would be this would be trying to go along Birch Plain Creek south of the Thames River Magnet School. There's some couple of parcels there to connect up with the city's Birch Plain Creek Park. So you'd have to go across some there's 2 parcels there that one is Branford Manor and the other one is an empty lot. Okay. It has limited development possibilities. So you kind of get so those are the first 2 here for the crosstown, and it came up that as far as the value of the land and how much access we would be taking away, there's a portion for the trail itself, which is typically 25 feet either side of the center line of what you want, and then everything that's lost to the creek. So the guy can't cross over and develop anything, so he can still do whatever he wants on his parcel that's left over. So that's the lost area that would be part of a conservation easement. Okay, so what it would look like, since our trail is the greenway is designated to be right along, pretty much alongside creek, it's really not that big an area. You lose basically lost access was like 3 acres over the length, principally narrow strip in one case and 4 acres in the other. Okay, but the land values are kind of really all over the map here when you kind of take a look at what the size of the property is and how much they're paying in taxes and the mill rates assessments on it. It's like $2,000. It's kind of like lost in the grass to some degree, as far as because the tax abatement was what they would be, what the town would be losing in future income. But on the other one, on the Branford Manor, because it is so heavily developed, that property, is and the land value itself is $11 million, and then you put all the apartments on there, it comes up to like $53 million. So there's a lot of income coming into the town from Branford Manor, and so that there's this one has, I had additionally put in the town mill rate, but then I failed to take into consideration that these guys are getting a tax abatement, so it brings the mill rate down for them to about and cutting in half. And so rather than $220,000 that the town would lose, it's only really $117,000 based on their current.
And the other 2 properties combined is like 100
And then the third properties for the Tri-Town Trail, it's like $100,
Yeah.
less than $200.
So given all that, I mean, you talked about 3 things. One, do we want to have an ordinance in general to talk about this?
Yes.
The other one is the 3 properties.
Yes.
And then when you look at the 3 of them,
Is
it
it
seems
real-
to me go after the two, that's like $100 impact to the town. And that sets the precedent.
Yeah.
And then we could talk about an ordinance
And
later.
then the real question is it really worth going through all the rigmarole here? To put an ordinance in place, to put in, and all the deeds and all this kind of stuff. There's quite a lot involved from the legal fees and everything else. Do we want to pursue this? But I think it was worth doing the exercise here. My personal recommendation is we don't go any farther with this. As far as we just had the information, we reviewed it, and it's in our record right now as far as what the impacts
Well,
would be. And
So are you recommending we don't go after that 176?
no, I don't think we should go after any of this at this point.
Okay, other inputs? I'm pushing this along because he's got to leave.
I trust Tom.
Are you saying not to put this enabling legislation in place?
That's correct. That's my recommendation is after my quick analysis here, because the legislation went into effect yesterday, literally. Okay.
Right.
And so, what should our recommendation be to the town council? Should they go pursue this? Because now that they have in place, my recommendation is do nothing. Just there's not a sufficient gain to the need out there from at this time.
It's in place.
Yeah, the state allows
The
you to
state.
do it. The
Right,
state
enabling, but the town has
has
not.
to put an enabling ordinance, a local,
Right.
that's how I put the draft one in here, what it would look like.
So for now, but I'm wondering about for future reference.
Well, it's on record now.
Let it
Yeah.
come up when it needs to come up.
Mhm.
There's nobody pushing for the trail, so the crosstown greenway. That's really with the city is the prime driver. Okay, that's trying to make that. They put the trail in at Sassacus and continuing down to connect their parks. It's basically from Washington Park all the way down to Birch Plain Creek. So it's all in the city. So we're going to let the city, if they want to come forward, to put it in, because it would have to be a town ordinance, okay, to get from a tax perspective.
Okay, so without objection, we're going to do no action on this particular one.
Okay,
So done.
no problem.
Okay,
Thank you.
and thank
Tom.
you.
I'm off to talk about.
You're off the talk, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we did get through that. Okay, that was 4.2, now it's 4.3. Plan of Conservation Development. Well, we talked a lot about that. And I'm thinking, I don't have anything other on waste management.
I'm going to that waste conference on
Oh, you are?
day after tomorrow. Turned out for some reason I'm a member of that board. So it only costs $75, not 125.
And the town agreed to reimburse
Yeah.
you on that.
Okay, so I'll send you like an invoice or something.
Yeah, send me an invoice,
Okay.
yeah, with just contact information, because you should be in there, but you should just put your contact information, like your address and everything. We'll just send a check to.
All right, so in the November meeting, what the heck happened to this year? So in the November meeting, we'll get a report out on that conference.
All right, you're on, Kristen.
She's on the agenda.
Long day over there.
Okay. Budget support. The CIP for open space, we did discuss that already. It's in the agenda. It's in for staff review. So I guess my point is there any question, and this is like the second time around. So are there any new comments, additions, changes, updates that anybody wants to raise on that CIP definition? All right, so we're now awaiting staff feedback on that proposal.
On the
The open space
CIP,
CIP, yeah.
Did you, I have it.
Right.
Do you want to do you want to send something official to John Reiner? On behalf of the commission, like you just send I was CC'd on it, so it's up to you if you want to say this is our draft, or I can they have a copy of it. I didn't know if you wanted to do something more official.
Well, I guess the first thing is there any comments just from staff on the preliminary draft? Let's
All right,
start
then
that.
I'll deal with that, yeah.
Right, and that's a yay or nay, and then I can take away the updates, because it's like red updates from the last time we sent it to you. Then I can remove that and send it in as a formal, this is our formal draft, rather than an initial draft. Okay, fair enough. I mean, we're gonna have another bite at the apple.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't think it's very controversial since we're not asking for any new monies.
We keep getting one.
Yeah, because we keep getting money.
So-
So that's a good thing. You kids, public record.
They would know anyways.
Yeah. Okay, okay, so we did the budget support. I have no updates on the vacant land review. The PRUC, we're awaiting. We're waiting the town manager to call
Yes.
such a meeting and it's waiting. Okay.
That's what I heard.
Okay. Connecticut College Project.
Yep.
We
Really
got,
quick.
we got one.
We got one. So I now have all the
let me-
documents
let me
from all
bring it up.
4 projects. I have the last webpage written up. And we don't have to look at, we can put it in the agenda for next month. It's not in any hurry.
Okay.
And I have a Dropbox where I can put that stuff, so if anybody wants to be. You know, some people don't like adding stuff to Dropbox because it's space, whatever, but if someone wants to be on the Dropbox. I'm gonna have each year a folder for all of the deliverables from the group for each year. So
Okay, so
Is this gonna go on the website?
yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
just getting to.
well,
So
the webpage will,
the web page, yeah, this page,
Oh,
right.
this page.
this
will
page
go
will go
the-
on the website
right.
Okay,
with,
Yeah.
I don't know, you could put a little intro paragraph.
Yeah, I need to see where that, I started it down, then I got distracted, so I will give, once I see where this is, I'll give you words for it. Basically, that we worked with. When you said.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like 3
Yeah.
sentences,
Right,
you know,
yeah.
and it's in there and you've got the template
I
that's
just
already for
I
this
just need to
stuff.
find, yeah, I just need
That's
to
it.
go and find it.
Okay, if you
So,
give,
right.
if you give me that, I will then get it to IT.
Okay,
Okay, all right.
So
So,
is this an opportunity for us to actually see each one of the reports?
that's,
Written.
right, so that's the good point. So, good point to make. So the one pager is what becomes public on the website. The commission, if you want to see all the reports,
got it.
I can give you access to the Dropbox where they all live. Should I just add everybody to the Dropbox? And if you don't want to be in there, you just don't accept?
yes,
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I think I should have everybody's,
yeah, right.
at some point, have all the emails. Okay.
now, there's nothing that would formally restrict.
Oh, all 6 of us.
No, I didn't mean that. I meant if someone, let's say from GCA. Might say, gee, I'd like to see the report behind here. Is there anything from the College that would restrict dissemination to
We
selected
could
parts?
send it to people. I just don't want to add a bunch of people. to
No,
the
no,
Dropbox.
that's
Yeah,
why I'm
Yeah, we
asking.
could send, but the thing is, they're student reports. It's not,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know, that's why we didn't want it out there.
exactly, they're
Right.
student reports. And they're for their purposes, and their presentations were already public. They gave their presentations
Yeah.
at our meeting, so they're on record and public. The reports are student projects, so it's not, nobody's gonna find anything amazing in any of these reports.
Say that. You might be listening, Michelle.
Yeah,
Well, they're student, I mean,
Never
it's
know.
it's
I mean,
good
I
stuff
find
for
little
us.
students-
dear students, don't take that to heart.
It's good stuff for us, and the purpose of the project was for them to learn about project management.
Mhm.
Not to come up with the master's thesis on the topic that they had.
That's right.
When did we get those?
Never from this group, we have sophomores.
No, I said, when are we gonna get to a master's?
Oh, yeah,
thesis?
wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? That's my comment.
Anyway, so I'll
Okay.
add everybody to the Dropbox. I'll
All
invite
right.
you to the Dropbox.
Thank you, finally, yay.
Well, the capstone
Oh,
project.
but,
that you
but-
do For seniors.
Yeah, but they're
um,
not our stuff.
then that brings us actually to,
It's directed from some other source.
the next one is
We'll talk offline.
January, we want to suggest projects for next year. So
Yes.
this meeting, we were gonna come in with some candidate suggestions for just.
No, November I thought it's November
Yeah,
meeting.
right here.
Yeah, the November meeting is,
But I got a couple. Come on.
okay, well,
That's good. You're ahead of the.
Right, see, you're way ahead. That's great.
All right.
Well, one is pretty easy, 2024 Earth Day.
yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I
that
kind of
was,
already figured that
that
one.
was a no-brainer. Then I had, community and how to get community involvement for the 2024 budgets on sustainability. You know what I kind of talked about earlier? I mean, how do you get to the community? How do you engender community involvement or in fact do community involvement? And then the third one, which relates to the 24 budget again, was the value of stewardship and why that is kind of a treatise on why that is important to provide stewardship for this land. I mean, there might be some quantification and qualification, quality, yeah, quantity, quantity.
Yeah, we'll have
I'm
to
ju-
have more
good.
discussion about the details of how that would turn into a project, but that's a good.
Yeah, I
starting
mean, I'm
idea.
just,
Yep.
that was kind of my three
Yep.
off the top
Yep,
of my
yep.
head. All right. So but next month,
Is
then.
the deeper dive.
Deeper
Deeper
dive
dive,
into
yep.
other ones, okay.
Did, was there any feedback from the college about what projects they might like? It might be nice to ask them.
No, I talk with Jen all the time, and I figured I'd invite her to the next meeting. To listen to the discussion and add in or whatever, see if she's available to zoom in on the next meeting.
Okay.
And the only thing I'd say is probably invite her for the second hour, like after 6, because we have Megan and Michelle
Okay.
coming in first, so that way she's not waiting around.
Right. Got it.
All right, so we're probably gonna have, we'll have to get together the agenda to kind of squeeze it to be able to fit that in.
Yep.
I mean, fit in all the things.
Or I can just text her when we're at that discussion.
But I don't know, but I'm just saying is that we'll probably take up an hour like we did with
I
Zell.
know,
We'll
that's what I'm
probably take-
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, and therefore, and I was been kind of trying to rush through the agenda.
Well, we've actually, because your updates have covered a lot of
Right,
stuff on the
exactly.
agenda, so
Yeah.
it's worked out. So
yeah, okay, that was the plan. That was, it was planned that way.
All right,
yeah.
you got it down.
Okay, so we're now down to the end here. So the next one was open space stewardship.
I'm making new on that.
Well, that was quick.
Yep.
And the last one was outreach.
We haven't done anything on that either. We're kind of,
It was summer, yeah, I was kind of thinking, it's the summer months, we kind of did slow down a little bit.
well, Ann, our missing member was gonna be that person, so now we have to shift gears
Yeah,
again, since it's
yeah,
not gonna be.
Is the missing person not staying or just missing for today?
6 months.
Oh, okay.
I said earlier, and it's not a public record.
Mm.
thing.
So is outreach on,
Not
We need
POCD.
to,
Not
yeah.
PLCD out.
no,
Right,
no, not.
right,
yeah.
right.
Well, it's
Yes and
But
no,
it
there,
could
it's
be
all
related,
connected.
right?
It's all connected. So
I
we should
mean-
probably have actually, we should have a discussion about what we mean by outreach.
Yeah,
And what we were looking for. So I think setting, doing one of these set asides and not necessarily bringing in an expert, but us talking about what we think is going on with outreach and what we want to do with it.
Mhm.
Because
How
I think we
about-
all have different ideas of what.
How about
what it
January?
means. Works for me.
Yeah,
I
sounds
mean, we
good.
kind of we hit waste management, we
Yep.
hit sustainability, we're
so
gonna hit.
but outreach on that, I mean, at some point. We need to kind of work on the topic, but I think at some point. Doing some educational pieces in the community like we did with plastics is gonna be needed.
Right, well, that's what we have to talk about. Then we should
Yeah.
start planning. We should
Yeah.
make it part of
Yeah.
our ongoing plan process is to have outreach built into our processes. somehow.
So is there a staff member, et cetera, to invite on that? I mean, we talking bring Stacy back in, because
I
don't know.
think
We
we
should have a
should better,
discussion first.
I think we need to better define what we're looking for before we
Yeah,
figure
and
out who
then
else to
think
bring
about,
in.
and the timing
There's a
and,
lot of capability right in this room.
Right, we just have to gather, because I think we're sort of literally all over the place with this. And we need to corral it a little bit and focus, so.
Good point, Michelle.
okay, so regardless, in January,
We'll talk
we'll
right on
talk
the
about it.
agenda and have a discussion about
Okay.
outreach, yeah.
All right, and that kind of lines up. Now that I think about it, we've kind of had something on all the major topics. Which then gets us to February, which is when we start getting the staff.
But we didn't pick a month for stewardship, but I don't know that we have to because we spent
been
like the
doing
whole
that
last year
for-
doing stewardship. we've
Done a lot on stewardship.
done, right,
And the big thing is the CIP for stewardship in the budget really
Right.
is the action.
that is the action, absolutely.
To
Yep.
move that
Yes.
forward. I mean, we're
Yes.
kind of frozen
Right.
without the resources to.
I'm saying, I'm agreeing that we haven't done it, but we don't need to. We
Yeah,
don't
no,
need to
okay,
spend
all right.
it
So I'm
separate.
just thinking from a schedule point of view, we're actually not in bad shape
Right.
because the budget stuff starts February.
Yep.
And, fits right into the outreach because that's almost the first thing we're gonna do in outreach.
Yeah,
so. These are our
Yeah,
categories.
we've done that,
Yeah.
we've done that, done that. We haven't done that, that's January,
Right,
we've
right.
done that,
And then we just.
and we
did-
just, yeah, okay.
Okay.
My God, we're right on schedule.
Sharp.
Don't go that far. Okay, last is new business. Business, new business. All right, report of staff.
Thank you. So I don't have much because we kind of went over everything. So like I said before, just a reminder, Megan and Michelle will be coming in next month to talk about stormwater and the MS4 program and some of the work they're working on. The other thing, which I know several of you, if not all of you, will be interested in, is that we're doing a rewrite of the landscaping regulations, which have been outdated for a while. And so Tabitha is spearheading that. And we would love your feedback. So wait a second. And wait.
You were gonna get it.
It's not, well, we have to go through the right channels, so it's not gonna be, I don't think it's gonna be on this month's planning and zoning, but we're trying to figure that out. Well, no, I don't think it is. I don't think at this point right now, it's close. It's within the next month or so. And as soon as it becomes, as soon as it's ready to go to planning and zoning, you'll know about it and you'll have a chance to look at it.
Okay,
These are just the initial.
oh, that's fine, but given our formal, we only have 2 jobs from the state.
Yep.
One of them's trees.
Yep.
And the other one, well, we did the inventory. So given the fact this is our second job,
Yep.
in terms of providing oversight on the tree warden and all things related to town-owned trees,
Yeah,
I'm assuming that our input is more than a suggestion.
yeah, no, that's why
It-
that's what I'm saying. We
Oh,
would like
okay.
your input.
Okay.
You know, like, so it's not, and again, we're changing regs, so it has to go to planning and zoning, right? So that's the process. But in this case, we would really like your input on the reg changes.
Before it goes to planning. and zoning?
No, because they have to, I think we talked about this kind of a process. We can't kind of supersede that. And again, if you followed any of the reg stuff, it takes time. It's not going to be like, oh, good to go. Let's go from there. So there's going to be plenty of time to discuss and whatnot. And it may be something too, like, obviously you'll see them in the agenda and stuff like that, but there'll be some time to this.
So is this like a January or February agenda item?
For planning and zoning
Well, the
Correct.
draft available.
earlier. I
earlier.
actually think it could be like even in November.
Oh.
So,
Okay, so,
It's not-
November meeting, which I'm gonna-
well, again, it can, there's ways to.
well, I was
there's
gonna
time.
say we can do some distribution and
Yes.
some other things
Yep.
prior to that, so
Yep.
why don't you and I work out that,
We still gotta work out the dates and the
I would
times.
say the
and-
timeline.
Yeah, and the draft, and because we've gone through now a couple versions already, and we're still refining it and stuff, so obviously we want to get it as close as we can prior to, getting it ready for review and then going from there, but at least from our side, make sure that everything is up to speed.
Okay,
But there are some, there'll be. So there's some guidance on trees. There's definitely some guidance. We're gonna actually include a plant list. So mostly natives. Now understand, like, sometimes you can't just do, we try to do all natives, but we also don't want to, if you can't get a native, especially for a landscaping, we don't want to have to go for a variance because you can't plant, you know what I mean? So there's
Yeah.
stuff like that we're
They're
thinking,
they're hard to get often.
and they are.
They're
Yeah.
scarce and rare and
Yeah,
stuff.
and I think that, that's also. I think about that as the commission gets more involved with the whole street trees thing and whatnot. Is to kind of continue to potentially push at least to local nurseries that we do need to have more selection of native plants for A, B, C, D, and E, all those reasons there. And so just some stuff to think about.
okay,
All right. That's all I got.
that's it.
Yeah, it's pretty
All right,
short today.
who do I normally go to?
I move we adjourn.
Okay, we go.
Second,
Any
I second.
discussion? I heard you.
sorry.
Any discussion? All right, without objections, the meeting is adjourned.
Meeting.
Hi.
Did it scare you away?